In 1938, a man murdered his unfaithful wife and then took his own life. After his death, his spirit was said to haunt the cemetery where he was buried, and may even have been responsible for something far worse. This week, we take a look at the curse of Carl Pruitt's grave. Music. For thousands of years, the idea of curses has been woven into human history. They are said to afflict everything from people to places, and even objects. Countless stories exist of tragedy striking those who dare to disturb something they shouldn't have. From the tombs of Egypt to chilling accounts, such as the mysterious death of Christopher Case. With so many examples of supposed curses, one has to wonder, could there be some truth to these tales, or are they nothing more than the products of fearful, superstitious imaginations? It's a subject we'll return to many times throughout this series, and one we've already touched upon before. But tonight, we revisit one of the eeriest and perhaps most infamous cases in modern history. Carl Pruitt was a carpenter from Pulaski County, Kentucky. To most, he was simply Mr. Pruitt. To his friends, just Carl. But because of a strange series of events that occurred even after his death, he would forever be remembered as a chain strangler. For Pruitt would never be allowed to rest in peace, and many believe his spirit was responsible for the untimely deaths of those who came into contact with his gravestone. In June 1938, the story begins. Carl came home from work one evening, expecting to find his wife preparing dinner. Instead, he discovered her in bed with another man. Known to have a vile temper, Pruitt flew into an uncontrollable rage. While his wife's lover managed to escape by leaping out of a window, she was not so fortunate. In his fury, Carl seized a length of chain, wrapped it around her neck, and strangled her to death. But as he stood over her lifeless body, remorse and horror consumed him. Moments later, he pulled out his pistol and ended his own life. The brutal murder-suicide devastated Mrs. Pruitt's family, who insisted that Carl be buried in a different cemetery, far from their beloved relative. His final resting place was never definitively identified, but it was believed to be in a graveyard several towns away. Then, something strange began to happen. Only a few weeks after Pruitt's burial, grass started to grow in odd, circular patterns around his gravestone, shaped like links of chain. Soon, a strange discoloration appeared on the headstone itself. The marks began to spread and form what looked like chains etched into stone, the links seeming to stretch outward toward the surrounding graves. Locals grew fearful and demanded the headstone be removed and destroyed, believing it to be cursed. Authorities, however, dismissed their concerns as nothing more than superstition. That would prove to be a mistake. Within a month, a teenager named James Collins was riding his bicycle with a group of friends. Curious and perhaps eager to prove the rumors false, he led them to Carl Pruitt's grave. He believed the chains appeared around the grave were nothing more than natural patterns, mere tricks of the eye, fueled by imagination and superstition. To prove his point, James Collins picked up a rock and hurled it directly at Pruitt's headstone, chipping a piece off the top. Fearing trouble with the groundskeeper or even the locals, the boy quickly got back on his bike and pedaled away. But as he rode, something strange happened. His bicycle suddenly picked up speed, veered off the path, and slammed into a nearby tree. In the chaos, the chain somehow snapped loose, wrapped around his neck, and strangled him to death. Later, when his friends returned to examine the headstone, they were shocked to find no damage at all, despite having clearly witnessed James strike and deface it. Rumors spread quickly. Whispers of curses, vengeful spirits, and black magic circulated through town, and before long, everyone was linking Collins' death to Pruitt's grave. Some weeks later, James's mother, overcome with grief and rage, sought revenge. She marched into the graveyard with an axe and, according to witnesses, smashed the headstone into a dozen pieces. But only days afterward, when neighbors grew concerned about her absence, she was discovered dead, her body hanging from the clothesline in her own backyard. And yet, when the townsfolk returned to the cemetery, they found the gravestone completely intact, as if it had never been touched. By now, the story of Carl Pruitt's cursed grave had spread far and wide. Visitors from across the country came to see the mysterious headstone for themselves, much to the irritation of the locals. One day, a farmer fed up with the attention the grave was bringing to his town, decided to take matters into his own hands. Riding past the cemetery with his family in a horse-drawn wagon, he pulled out his revolver and fired at the stone. The gunshot startled the horse, caused it to bolt and careen out of control. His family managed to leap to safety, but the farmer was thrown from the wagon. In a grim twist of fate, one of the trace chains snapped tight around his neck, breaking it instantly. After this tragedy, the growing legend drew the attention of politicians. At the request of a local congressman, 2 police officers were dispatched to investigate. Instead of treating the case with seriousness, the officers mocked the supposed curse. They posed for photographs, laughing and striking crude gestures in front of the headstone. But their amusement would not last. As they drove away from the cemetery, they noticed a strange glowing orb of light rising from Pruitt's grave. It followed their car, darting toward them no matter how fast they drove. In a panic, the driver swerved sharply. One officer was thrown from the vehicle, suffering only minor injuries. But the driver wasn't so fortunate. The car crashed into a fence, and one of the chains strung between its posts snapped upward, striking the officer across the neck and nearly decapitating him. He died instantly. After this 4th death, the tale of Carl Pruitt's grave was no longer just a rumor. It was a full-blown legend of a vengeful spirit. Yet, not everyone was convinced. A man named Arthur Lewis was determined to prove the whole thing was nothing more than superstition. Armed with a hammer and chisel, he entered the graveyard one evening, watched by an anxious crowd gathered just beyond the gates. His wife, before he left, had nervously wished him luck. At first, Lewis worked methodically, striking the headstone again and again. But then, a blood-curdling scream split the night air. By the time the crowd rushed to his aid, it was too late. Arthur Lewis lay dead. Arthur Lewis had somehow been strangled by the large chain that hung across the cemetery's entrance gate. Up to 15 witnesses swore they had seen or heard him splinter Pruitt's headstone into pieces. Yet, once again when the dust settled, the gravestone stood completely intact. Despite the string of bizarre deaths, authorities still refused to admit publicly that there was anything unusual about the gravesite, but fear spread quickly among the locals. Many families with loved ones buried in the same cemetery made the heartbreaking choice to exhume their relatives and move them elsewhere, unwilling to risk leaving them in such a place. Whispers of Carl Pruitt's ghost lingered for years, long after the last recorded death. Then, in 1958, the original cemetery was redeveloped to make way for strip mining. The common belief was that Pruitt's reign of terror had ended for good, his remains buried deep beneath concrete and machinery. And yet, no deaths linked to the grave had occurred since the late 1930s, meaning there was a nearly 20-year period of silence before the redevelopment. This has led some to speculate that Pruitt's body may have been moved long before the land was disturbed, relocated quietly to an undisclosed location. If that is true, then perhaps the spirit of Carl Pruitt is not gone at all, merely waiting for the next time his grave is uncovered. The supposed paranormal killing spree has been retold many times in books, documentaries, and internet forums. As with most legends, the details shift between accounts. Some say that the discolored chains on the headstone formed into the shape of a cross. Others claim Mrs. Collins' washing line, the one she was found hanged from, was made of chain rather than rope or wire. While these variations are intriguing, they also suggest the possibility of embellishment, with the real truth becoming blurred or lost over time. Skeptics also raise practical questions. For instance, why would an experienced farmer risk firing a gun at a supposedly cursed gravestone while still harnessed to a horse-drawn wagon carrying his family? Surely, he would have known that the sound of gunfire would make the animal bolt. Adding further doubt, many important details are conspicuously absent from the record. The first name of Mrs. Pruitt, the name of her lover, even the identity of the farmer, all seem to be missing. Some argue this was done out of respect for surviving relatives. Others whisper of a cover-up. Searches of public records for deaths, burials, or inquests involving a Carl Pruitt in Kentucky during that period yield nothing, leaving researchers with more questions than answers. So, did Carl Pruitt ever truly exist? Was his cursed grave a real chapter of American folklore, or nothing more than an elaborate urban legend? We may never know. But if there is any truth to the tale, if Carl Pruitt's restless spirit still lingers, then somewhere in an unmarked and forgotten plot of Earth, the chained strangler may still be watching, waiting. And should anyone disturb his grave again, the legend suggests they would pay with their life. The memory of Carl Pruitt lives on. Music, music,